The historical rivalry of Esau and Jacob, the transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade was significantly shaped and profited from by Jewish merchants, who made up a substantial majority of those involved, alongside European Christians, Arabs, Muslims, and some African tribes. Each of the players played a different role. However, the main beneficiaries were the Edomites. The descendants of the Edomites are the Jewish merchants from Portugal, the Netherlands, and European Christians from various European countries. Some of the reasons the Israelites were targeted for the transatlantic slave trade were economic motivation, geographical proximity, cultural and religious factors, as well as historical rivalries. Based on historical facts, the roles played in the transatlantic slave trade were as follows. The European Edomite Christians, by way of the Vatican and royal families, held the religious and political power. They provided ideological justification for slavery like divine right and racist theology. The Edomite Jewish merchants, by dominating finance and trade networks, also played a very significant role in organizing and profiting from the slave trade. They utilized their extensive trade connections and experience. African tribes and leaders were exploited and manipulated through trade agreements and settlements. Some African leaders collaborated with European powers, while others resisted. Many Africans were victims of enslavement, forced labor, and cultural destruction. These groups formed a complex confederacy, with each playing a role in perpetuating the slave trade. The Vatican and the royal families provided political and ideological support, while the Jewish merchants handled financing and logistics. African tribes were exploited and manipulated, with some African leaders coerced into collaborating. Before the start of the slave trade, Hebrew kingdoms thrived throughout the entirety of Africa, controlling significant resources. They had access to rivers like the Nile, Niger, and Congo, which provided transportation routes, fishing, and irrigation for agriculture. Hebrew kingdoms controlled regions with rich gold, copper, and other valuable mineral deposits. They also maintained extensive trade connections across Africa, Europe, and Asia. These kingdoms occupied fertile areas suitable for agriculture, like the Niger Delta and Ethiopian highlands. Many Israelite communities were located near major trade hubs. The Edomites, being the Jewish merchants and European Christians, recognized the strategic importance of these Hebrew kingdoms. So they targeted and dismantled them. Their goal was to disrupt trade networks by gaining control of lucrative trade routes and resources, also to exploit the resources by gaining access to the valuable mineral, agricultural produce, and other resources, and to weaken African resistance. By destroying the Hebrew kingdoms, they could easily coerce and colonize the other African groups.
The Hebrew trade routes and kingdoms spanned across various regions, playing a significant role in ancient global commerce and cultural exchange. Europe, Asia, and Africa were all locations of Hebrew trade routes and kingdoms prior to the transatlantic slave trade. In Africa, Hebrews held powerful kingdoms in various places. The Kingdom of Kush was known for its gold, iron, and bronze production. The Kingdom of Axum, a Hebrew kingdom, controlled the Red Sea trade and was a major center for ivory, gold, and spices. The Hebrews also had a presence in other African regions, such as Egypt, North Africa, the Horn of Africa, and many others. In Europe, the Kingdom of Judah, located in the Mediterranean, was a Hebrew kingdom that traded extensively with Greece, Rome, and other Mediterranean powers. Hebrew merchants were active in European cities like Carthage, Corinth, and Rome. In Asia, black Hebrew Israelite merchants played a significant role in the ancient Silk Road, trading goods like silk, spices, and precious stones between China, India, and the Mediterranean. The Kingdom of Himyar was a Hebrew kingdom that controlled the Arabian Peninsula and its trade routes, including the frankincense and myrrh trade. Some of the major trade routes include the King's Highway Africa-Asia, a major trade route connecting Africa, Arabia, and Asia. Over time, these kingdoms evolved and their influence waxed and waned. However, they stand as a testament to the majesty of the Black Hebrew Israelites. Their presence in global trade and commerce was significant, and their legacy continues to shape our understanding of a resilient people from ancient times through today's modern era. The Israelites, known in modern times as the Black Hebrew Israelites in mainstream society, but who prefer to just be called the Israelites, are a diverse group. They are made up of phenotypes of Black, Native American and Latino according to historical data, science and the 12 tribes chart of the Hebrew Israelites. Their resourcefulness and strategic control of key resources made them a significant presence in ancient global trade and commerce. Their cultural achievements were indeed envied by other nations, and their legacy can be seen in various areas. The Black Hebrew Israelites developed sophisticated irrigation systems, allowing them to cultivate fertile lands and produce abundant crops. Architecture. Their building techniques, such as the use of stone and brick, influenced the construction of ancient monuments and cities. Metalwork. Black Hebrew Israelites were skilled metalworkers, producing high-quality iron, copper, and bronze tools and artifacts. Textiles. They created vibrant, intricate fabrics, and their expertise in dyeing and weaving was renowned. And most of all, music and art. Their musical instruments, such as the lyre and harp, and artistic expressions like pottery and sculpture, showcased their creativity.
Hit like, share, subscribe, comment. The creativity of the Hebrew Israelites is world-renowned. To this very day, their cultural achievements and control of resources made them a target for conquest and exploitation by other nations, especially the Edomites and European powers. The event that led to the turning point was the rise of the Roman Empire and its alliance with the Edomites. The Romans, seeking to expand their empire, formed a strategic alliance with the Edomites, who sought revenge against the Israelites. Around 70 CE, the Romans, with Edomite guidance, besieged and destroyed Jerusalem, the center of Israelite power. This event marked the beginning of the end of Hebrew Israelite dominance in trade and commerce in the world. Although the Black Hebrew Israelites did have armies, they were no match for the combined forces of the Romans and Edomites. The siege of Jerusalem was a pivotal moment for the Hebrew Israelites, and the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem marked the beginning of the diaspora. After the 70 CE diaspora, many of the Black Hebrew Israelites were dispersed to various parts of the world, largely Africa and some to the Americas. Some migrated to Africa, where they established communities throughout the continent, in such places as Ghana and Senegal, and more. They influenced many African cultures and traditions while maintaining their Hebrew identity and practices. The Edomites, with their extensive trade networks and connections, played a crucial role in infiltrating and manipulating the Israelite kingdoms. The Romans, with their military might, provided the necessary force to crush the Israelite resistance. This alliance, coupled with internal divisions and weaknesses within the Israelite kingdoms, ultimately led to their downfall. The transatlantic slave trade was a later development, built upon the foundations laid by the Edomites and Romans. European powers, seeking to expand their empires, exploited the existing networks and connections established by the Edomites. The plan was indeed intricate, involving multiple players and spanning centuries. Its success can be attributed to a combination of strategic alliances, military might, and the exploitation of internal weaknesses within the Israelite kingdoms. After the destruction of Jerusalem, the Israelites were scattered, and their trade networks were dismantled. The Edomites and Romans exploited this power vacuum, taking control of the lucrative trade routes and resources. The Edomites, now in a position of power, implemented policies aimed at erasing Israelite identity and culture. This included forced conversions, cultural suppression, and the imposition of Edomite customs and beliefs. In Africa, European powers, particularly Portugal, Spain, and Britain, established colonies and exploited existing trade networks. They formed alliances with local leaders, some of whom were Edomite or Arab, to enslave and export Hebrew Israelites and any other Africans aligned with them. The Edomites implemented policies aimed at erasing Israelite identity and culture, including but not limited to forced conversions. Israelites were forced to adopt Edomite or Roman religions, leading to a loss of cultural heritage. Cultural suppression meant that Israelite customs, language, and traditions were suppressed, replaced by Edomite or Roman practices, and even the imposition of Edomite customs. Edomite beliefs, practices, and laws were imposed upon the Israelites, further eroding their identity. As the centuries passed, the Israelites were further marginalized, and their connections to their ancestral lands and trade networks were severed. This set the stage for the transatlantic slave trade, which would later devastate Israelite communities in Africa and beyond. It was a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and power struggles that ultimately led to the devastation of Israelite communities and the dispersal of their people. The key players in this tragic event included the European powers, Portugal, Spain, Britain, and others, the Edomite and Arab leaders in Africa, the Roman Empire, Edomites and/or Jewish merchants, and various groups of Edomite descendants. Their actions led to the displacement, enslavement, and cultural erasure of the Israelites, leaving a lasting impact on world history to this very day. The exploration of the complex history between the Edomites, Romans, and Israelites is also mandatory to clearly understand the transatlantic slave trade. The Edomites and Israelites had a long history of conflict dating back to about 1765 BCE to the time of Esau and Jacob, as stated in the Bible Genesis 25:26, 27:41. The Edomites often clashed with Israelites over territory, resources, and trade routes. Religious differences also played a huge part as the Edomites practiced a polytheistic religion, worshipping various gods and goddesses according to 2 Kings chapter 14 verse 7 and 2 Chronicles chapter 25 verses 14 to 15, while the Israelites on the other hand adhered to a strict monotheistic faith, worshipping only Yahweh as stated in Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 4 and Isaiah chapter 43 verses 10 to 11. These religious differences led to mutual distrust and hostility. Power struggles also played a huge role. The Edomites sought to supplant Israelite dominance in trade, commerce, and geopolitics as seen in 2 Kings chapter 8, verses 20 to 22, and 2 Chronicles chapter 28, verses 16 to 17. However, the Romans in turn sought to expand their empire and exploit the resources and networks of both Edomites and Israelites. The Edomites and Romans spread false narratives and stereotypes to demonize the Israelites, as seen in the Bible in Matthew chapter 27 verse 25 and John chapter 8 verse 48. These lies included accusations of ritual murder, conspiracy, and sedition. Political manipulation was key as well. Edomites formed alliances with neighboring nations to oppose Israelite interests as stated in 2 Kings chapter 16, verses 5 to 9, and 2 Chronicles chapter 28 verses 16 to 17. Romans exploited these divisions to further their own ambitions. Edomites also disrupted Israelite trade networks and commerce, whilst the Romans imposed heavy taxes and tributes on Israelites, stifling their economic growth. Fast forward to the medieval European kingdoms. Holy Roman Empire. Established by Charlemagne, this empire sought to revive Roman dominance and suppress Israelite influence. The British Empire was shaping as well. Emerging later, this empire built upon the networks and knowledge stolen from the Israelites. The merchant guilds and trade federations played a huge role as well. The Hanseatic League, a powerful trading federation, dominated European commerce and suppressed Israelite trade networks. Banking and financial networks, like the Medici family, formed a prominent banking dynasty that exploited Israelite financial expertise and contributed to their marginalization. An exhaustive exploration reveals the complex web of rivalries, religious differences, power struggles, and propaganda that led to the tragic events of the transatlantic slave trade and the ongoing marginalization of the Israelites. The Edomites and Romans' actions have led to the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, the enslavement and displacement of Hebrew Israelites, the suppression of Israelite culture and identity, and the establishment of a new ruling class, Edomites and European powers. This new ruling class exploited the stolen networks and knowledge to build their own empires, perpetuating a system of oppression. The Israelites, scattered and marginalized, faced forced conversions and assimilation, cultural erasure and identity loss, economic exploitation and poverty, and political disenfranchisement and powerlessness. Despite these challenges, Israelites maintained their cultural heritage and identity, often in secret. The transatlantic slave trade during the 15th to 19th centuries saw millions of black Hebrew Israelites forcibly enslaved and transported to the Americas. This brutal system was fueled by European powers' demand for labor and resources, perpetuating the cycle of exploitation and oppression. The legacy of this complex history continues to impact contemporary society, with ongoing struggles for justice, equality, and recognition. Key events and figures in this history include the Roman Empire's expansion and conquests, the rise of Christianity and its complex relationship with Judaism, the Crusades and their impact on Jewish communities, the Inquisition and its persecution of Jews and other minorities, and the emergence of European powers and their colonial empires. Figures like Herod the Great, the Edomite king who ruled Judea, Constantine, the Edomite Roman emperor who adopted Christianity, Charlemagne, the Holy Roman Emperor who expanded European power, and Queen Elizabeth I, the British monarch who established the Church of England. These events and figures have shaped the complex history of the Edomites, Romans, and Israelites with far-reaching consequences. The Edomites, as a ruling class, perpetuated a system of oppression, exploiting the Israelites' knowledge, networks, and resources. This led to cultural appropriation, Edomites adopting Israelite customs, practices, and beliefs, often distorting or corrupting their original meaning. Identity theft, Edomites claiming Israelite heritage, lineage, or identity, further marginalizing the true Israelites, and even historical revisionism. Edomites altering or erasing Israelite history, replacing it with their own narrative. Figures like Constantine, Charlemagne, and Queen Elizabeth I, as Edomites, played significant roles in shaping European powers and perpetuating this system of oppression. Constantine's adoption of Christianity, for example, marked a significant turning point in history, as it legitimized Christianity as a state religion, marginalized the ancient Israelites' original form of Judaism and Israelite practices, and paved the way for the Crusades and Inquisition. Charlemagne's expansion of the Holy Roman Empire further solidified Edomite power, while Queen Elizabeth I's establishment of the Church of England cemented Anglicanism as a tool of Edomite control. These events and figures have contributed to the complex web of oppression, identity theft, and cultural appropriation that continues to impact so-called Black, Latino, and Native American Israelite communities today. The so-called Black Hebrews Israelites had a presence in the Americas long before the transatlantic slave trade. In fact, there is evidence to suggest that they traveled to the Americas around 800 to 1,000 years before Christopher Columbus's famous voyage in 1492. This is supported by various historical accounts, archaeological findings, and linguistic research. For example, the Bat Creek Stone, an inscription found in Tennessee, USA, written in ancient Hebrew script dating back to around 1000 CE. The Los Lunas Decalogue Stone, an inscription found in New Mexico, USA, written in ancient Hebrew script, dating back to around 1200 CE. And the Paraíba Stone, an inscription found in Brazil, written in ancient Hebrew script, dating back to around 1200 CE. These findings, along with others, suggest that Hebrews or Israelites had a significant presence in the Americas long before the arrival of European colonizers. It's also important to note that the Edomites and Europeans were aware of the Hebrews' presence in the Americas and sought to exploit their knowledge and resources. This is evident in the accounts of early European explorers, who often encountered Hebrew-speaking populations in the Americas. The Hebrews' knowledge of the Americas and their presence there played a significant role in the Edomites and Europeans' desire to explore and colonize the New World. This led to, well, collaboration and trade. Initially, the Edomites and Europeans formed alliances with the Hebrews, learning from their expertise and utilizing their resources. Betrayal and exploitation. As time passed, the Edomites and Europeans turned against the Hebrews, seeking to dominate and exploit them. This exploitation ultimately contributed to the transatlantic slave trade, as the Edomites and Europeans sought to enslave and displace the Hebrews and other indigenous populations. Some notable figures who acknowledge the Hebrews' presence in the Americas include, but are not limited to, Christopher Columbus. He encountered Hebrew-speaking populations in the Caribbean and noted their presence in his journals. And Bartolomé de las Casas, a Spanish historian who documented the presence of Hebrews in the Americas and their exploitation by European colonizers. The Hebrews' presence in the Americas is a crucial aspect of history, highlighting the complex dynamics of exploration, trade, and exploitation that shaped the modern world. The Hebrews' presence in the Americas can be traced back to several waves of migration, including but not limited to ancient Hebrew explorers and traders around 800 to 1000 CE. Post-temple destruction refugees around 70 to 150 CE and medieval Hebrew travelers and settlers around 1200 to 1500 CE. These migrations led to the establishment of Hebrew communities throughout the Americas, including the Caribbean, especially Jamaica and Hispaniola. South America, places like Brazil and Peru, and even North America, places like the USA and Mexico. The Hebrews brought with them their language, culture, and traditions, which blended with those of the indigenous populations. However, the arrival of European colonizers led to displacement and marginalization, forced conversions and assimilation, and even enslavement and exploitation. Despite these challenges, some Hebrew communities in the Americas maintained their identity and cultural heritage, often in secret. Some notable examples of Hebrew influence in the Americas include and are not limited to the Maroons of Jamaica, escaped slaves who formed Hebrew-influenced communities, the Igbo people of Nigeria and the Americas, who share cultural and linguistic ties with Hebrews, and the Native American Hebrew communities, for example, the Cherokee, who have a significant Hebrew-speaking population. The history of the Hebrews in the Americas is a rich and complex one, highlighting the resilience and cultural exchange that define the ancient and medieval worlds. The transatlantic slave trade, including the Triangle slave trade, was indeed connected to the targeting of Hebrews and other indigenous populations in the Americas for exploitation. The Edomites and Europeans sought to exploit the resources and knowledge of the Hebrews and other native populations, leading to the enslavement of Hebrews and other indigenous peoples who were forcibly enslaved and transported to other regions. Enslaved Hebrews were forced to work on plantations, mines, and other industries. And even cultural suppression, Hebrews and other indigenous cultures were suppressed and their identities erased. The Triangle slave trade was a system of exploitation that involved European powers, for example, Portugal, Spain, Britain, Edomite and Arab traders, and African and indigenous leaders who were often coerced or manipulated. This system led to the displacement and enslavement of millions of people, mainly the so-called Black Hebrew Israelites, some Africans, and indigenous Americans who were Confederate with the Israelites. The targeting of Hebrews in the Americas was also driven by economic interests. Hebrews were known for their expertise in trade, commerce, and industry. Religious and ideological motivations also played a role. Edomites and Europeans sought to suppress Hebrew culture and identity. The transatlantic slave trade was a tragic consequence of these dynamics, leading to the displacement, enslavement, and cultural erasure of countless communities of Hebrews. This system of exploitation relied on networks of trade and commerce established by Hebrews and other indigenous populations, the forced labor of enslaved people, including Hebrews, Africans, and indigenous Americans, and the suppression of native cultures and identities. This system was, and still is, perpetuated by European powers such as Portugal, Spain, and Britain, better known as the revived Roman Empire. Edomite and Arab traders, as well as African and indigenous leaders who were often coerced or manipulated by the slavers, also played a role. The targeting of Hebrews in the Americas was driven by, and not limited to, economic interests and religious and ideological motivations. Some notable examples of Hebrew enslavement include the Portuguese Inquisition from 1536 to 1821, where Hebrews were targeted for enslavement and forced conversion. The Spanish Inquisition from 1478 to 1834 also saw Hebrews targeted for enslavement and forced conversion. Additionally, during the transatlantic slave trade from the 15th to the 19th centuries, Hebrews, Africans, and indigenous Americans were forcibly enslaved and transported to the Americas. The legacy of this complex history continues to impact countless communities of Native American, Black, and Hispanic or Latino people today, with ongoing struggles for justice, equality, and recognition. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me into the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Repent now and keep the commandments.